A pleasure to meet all at last, and today I'm at it with another piece relating to Illumination. And so, while I have talked about The Secret Life of Pets, most of Despicable Me, if not all of which, and of course I had just recently talked a bit about the Lorax, why not go on ahead and talk a bit about Migration? Yeah, so this one is to some extent a bit on the lesser side in comparison to most of the others, but it actually did a good job by some critics and financial standards, despite it being somewhat overshadowed by many others at the time. The thing is, this was one of those films that actually made a bit of a beneficiary due to it being well into the holidays by the time it made its release. In fact, this was the last movie that I watched in 2023. And then, of course, the following day, we went on back to the theater where I would, of course, see The Boys in the Boat, along with my in-laws, if you will. Nonetheless, though, what I'd have to say about Migration is, well, a few things. The last real big time I did watch Migration was when I saw it in theaters in 2023. And now it's been less than 3 years since that happened, so you could say a good amount of time has passed. And I've gotten a lot to keep myself busy throughout those times. But of course, with everything I've gone through in the last 3 years or so, I will say, it was a bit tough to beat 2023 in terms of movies, games, or most other things in life. So we had a lot of fantastic things to talk about regarding 2023, not very much for negatives. In any other case though, Migration is a unique tale that Illumination put together in which that it allowed for a family of mallard ducks to make way from a New England pond all the way down to, and for some other point in the United States, but a bit of a plan allowed for them to go down to Jamaica instead. However, upon making their takeoff, we of course had ourselves the family, whom of course are the Mallards. You of course had Mac Mallard and Pam Mallard, played by Kumail Nanjiani and Elizabeth Banks respectively. And there's also Awkwafina, Trezi Ghazal, Luca Diaz, and even Danny DeVito playing Uncle Dan. Yeah, so I can't really say that Danny DeVito was a recurring thing in Illumination films, but you might remember when I talked about the Lorax, in which that he also starred in the Lorax. So Danny DeVito had made a return after 11 years. But what does this have to do with most of anything else? Well, the thing is that the family, at first, had their own share of challenges to overcome. Because rather than going straight down south, they somehow end up in the middle of New York City. And even though that was actually the starting point, in which that it was basically just outside the city, a local pond in the state of New York, the thing is, all these obstacles and things that they are now coming into contact with street signs, road traffic, and various separations along the way. This, of course, did allow for some of our characters to get into a bit of an intertwining. Because there, of course, eventually comes along a couple of different problems along the way. The thing is that we do come across a red bird whom is trapped in a cage and is in some sort of office. An idea eventually comes to set him free, but as we know, there is danger ahead. There is a guy who is simply credited as the chef, and while he is not exactly seen as a voiceful villain, he still is a pretty powerful one. I mean, this is the kind of chef whom is just as much of a star on TV, and to basically take some sort of red bird as some sort of captive for himself. Everybody does eventually make their way back out, escaping New York City long before this chef guy starts to grab a hold of his former captor. The thing is, though, that's actually the reason why they end up going down to Jamaica, because after all, had it not been for the rescuing of this red bird, they would not have made their way down to Jamaica in the first place. Or at least they wouldn't have their plans to do so. But in the time that goes by, a lot of it is mostly spent on getting down to the likes of Jamaica, but along the way, a few problems do ensue. Since after all, some of the youngest members of the mallard family do have some struggles with keeping aloft and in the air. And of course we do get some guidance along the way, as well as some other dialogue that comes around. And let's not forget that the chef manages to become a recurring character in addition to being a really villainous one. So while I can't say all that much about this film entirely, I can at least leave off on a note noting that there's a lot of the standard stuff that comes around, in which that the first encounter of our main antagonist does show up in a way then in which that allows for another character to join the party, but then of course with a few stops they have to make along the way, including one to try to disguise themselves in an effort for the chef to go away, there still is that notion in which that the deadly presence of the chef and his henchmen, whom are all out to kill these birds, all of these mallards that are just trying to go south for the winter. The whole thing about it is that it's a death-defying tale in which that the birds do so much that they can possibly think of in an effort to make their way down to their final destination. Now, I know Final Destination is going to be an entirely different topic for me to talk about, but with Migration, we have much of a similar thing going on. It's a lot like most of those road trip type of films that have come around over the years, and there's been a good amount of them that we've seen. I have talked about Duel, I have talked about Due Date, I have talked about Rain Man even, not too long ago. But overall, for Migration, coming towards the end of the film in which that the chef gets his embarrassing defeat, whoa, talk about it being a pretty horrifying ending. And of all people, it's got to be a chef who was out to kill some redbird and, more importantly, to take down these mallards. I mean, is he really that much of a duck person? We know duck meat is a bit different than chicken. It's a lot juicier, so to speak. But is he really that obsessed over it that he's willing to go after all these other ducks just to get what he's wanting? Or is it just because they couldn't really think of many other ways to put the villain together, so they had to resort to somebody known as the chef to do so? While I can't say all that much about this film, even after watching it more recently, it still is a bit tough for me to really make a good call on this. So I do like this overall concept of the idea of a bunch of ducks migrating south for the winter, and just the fact that there was a lot of obstacles that get in the way sometimes, some pit stops to get along the way, and some unsightly figures that unfortunately are out to get them. The hunter can always get a hold of their prey, but I guess in this instance, the prey ends up overshadowing the hunter by leagues. Noting that there is a lot that we don't quite know about ducks. Even the average person can tell you they don't quite know that much about ducks other than the fact that they quack and they fly in the air. But maybe that's the whole thing about it. This movie really does open your eyes in the facts that may be out there. A duck can be just as powerful or even deadly if they felt like it. So for my final scoring of Migration, I do at least enjoy a number of bits, but just the fact that it's a bit of a drag in terms of getting the villain to finally be defeated before the mallards make their way to Jamaica for the winter, I'll just go on ahead and leave it at a 7.0 out of 10.1. So, kind of the standard, but I can't really say that it's in any ways a great way to end the year of 2023. It was a pretty good film, and Illumination has been known to make some outstanding pieces, but the thing is that its poor start in the box office and whatnot, even though it managed to benefit because of the holidays, it just didn't quite hit as hard for home as what we saw with The Lorax, Despicable Me, or The Secret Life of Pets. Now, I'm sure that we're going to see more from Illumination in the coming years, but until then, I, of course, will get to talking about it when I can. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.